Mr. MacFarlane, how are you, sir?
Good, good. How are you, Mike?
I'm okay, thanks. I'm okay. It's been a while since we chatted about the Orville about a year and a half ago. So,
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
just wanted to say, as much as this interview is going to air just slightly after the holiday season, the sound of Seth and Liz has been kind of featured in my home lately. So, that fantastic album, and congratulations on that.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, that was it. We enjoyed that.
I wanted to talk about sound because I'd say your animation background is so ingrained in who you are as a creator that I find it really interesting that even with your live action properties, that you seemingly gravitate towards voice actors as people within your cast. What do you feel voice actors can bring to any kind of role that perhaps other actors can't?
I mean, it's a good question. It's actually not a conscious choice. It's something I gravitate towards great actors. Period. And I mean, God, they've all three of those actors I think have done either Family Guy or American Dad. Maybe it's a subconscious thing where there's a certain degree of comedic and emotional size to the performance that these actors bring. That they know how to use their voices in a way that gives them a sense of clarity and strength when they're speaking. I suppose that's possible. It really isn't a conscious decision, though. It's something that's surprisingly accidental. So I would have to think about that. Yeah, it's not something I was consciously aware of.
Well, I mean, just the fact that, like you said, you bring in amazing actors and you have your own kind of troupe that you can count on. It's great to see in all these projects across, regardless of genre or streaming service or anything like that.
Yeah.
When you and I spoke about the Orville, you had mentioned that you really enjoyed the freedom that streaming offered you in terms of the storytelling. So that if you needed an hour and a half to tell the story of an episode, you had an hour and a half. What was the balance that you really tried to strive for with Ted? Because I find you're still somewhat following the 3-act structure of a 90s sitcom, but at the same time, you do have a little bit of freedom. So what were you trying to do with the show?
Yeah, I mean, Ted is probably a little bit more of a balanced manifestation of that philosophy than the Orville was. I mean, the Orville was pretty epic in its intent. In season 3, we were really trying to kind of make ourselves heard and stick out in a very crowded landscape. But with Ted, the same advantages applied. It was really nice to have that freedom to and these shows are probably on average in the ballpark of like 35 minutes, like a true half hour. Whereas a sitcom is usually about 22 minutes. For a streaming service, we want to give people maybe a little bit more nourishment. So if anything, it's more analogous to like the last season of Curb Your Enthusiasm, is that it's a true half hour. But it does make a difference in telling a story. There's always something really tough and unnatural from a narrative standpoint to finish a show. And look, if something is playing long and it's boring, then you want to cut it down. And I've been in that situation too. The first cut of Ted was like 2.5 hours long of the movie. And it needed to be cut down because it overstayed its welcome. In terms of something that's the flip side of that, I've had episodes of Family Guy that were, maybe they're 4.5 minutes over length. And the story's working, and there's jokes that are really funny, but they got to come out because you got to cut it down to exactly 22 minutes and however many seconds. And storytelling doesn't work like that. Not every story is exactly the same length. They vary. And that's one of the things that is nice about streaming is that, 1 week it's 48 minutes. If you're doing an hour-long drama, say 1 week it's 48 minutes, 1 week it's 53 minutes. The Orville took that and put it on steroids, but for Ted, it really is a luxury because you're finished, you have a screening, and if there's things that don't work, they come out because they don't work, not because you got to hit some sort of arbitrary number.
When you were kind of dealing with the possible constraints of trying to kind of pay homage to the 90s sitcom and not being able to really rely on some of the other things in terms of cutaway gags and things that you're accustomed to with your animation. Did you feel constraints at all? Because again, streaming allows some sort of freedom, but it just, TED itself, the property, allows for a little bit of freedom as well. So did you ever feel constraints?
Yes, to some degree. That was a tricky thing to navigate because you couldn't reference anything post 1993 pop culture wise, but a lot of our audience does not remember 1993. Some do, some don't, and that presented the unique challenge of trying to find things that were going to be so universally known, stuff that's iconic enough that it will have transcended that decade. Things like The Simpsons or Married with Children, or even Roseanne. We reference all these shows. So that was one part of it. The other part of it actually was kind of a plus because, I look at a show like All in the Family as sort of the benchmark of how to strike that balance. I mean, there are direct references to what was going on politically at the time. They talk about Nixon, they talk about Watergate, they talk about Vietnam, they talk about a lot of very specific pieces of the socio-political landscape, but it's never so granular that you had to think back and know exactly what week this show was put into production to understand it. It's kept just general enough that you watch it today and it's still hilarious and you don't really need to have that frame of reference. And that was a really good, we did talk about that in the writer's room. That was a really good template as far as how to balance the specific of the era to the general that is required to appeal to a lot of different audiences.
Well, I love the balance of the show, and the 5 episodes that I get to screen are fantastic. Hopefully we'll get to chat again, hopefully about the Orville. You never know, knock on wood. But
who knows?
Fingers crossed. But Seth, thanks so much for your time. Happy holidays.
Well, thank you. You too. Thanks, man.
Hey Real students, thanks for watching. If you want to subscribe to Real School, click that round Real School logo right beside me. Also click that damn notification bell so you're aware of all of Real School's new content. You can follow me on Twitter, and of course, if you get anything out of Real School, you can always give a little back. Just click the link in the description below or the button down there, and you can become part of my Patreon team.